G'day guys, welcome to another video, and we are here in the Jawa factory in Sydney, in the suburb of Windsor, so have a look around maybe.
Yeah.
I actually got a load
Check
in.
it out. Back in the workshop, where it all happens.
Now, as you would have seen in the title of this video, this one's all about ball weight, and the reason that I wanted to talk about ball weight is I think it's one of those things where when you've been travelling in these sorts of vans for many years, you kind of take it for granted, and it's one of those things that over time you collect all the data that you need to almost intuitively know where your van is, and then when you combine it when on your long haul drives and those sorts of things, you will start to feel the difference in the car depending on where the ball weight's sitting. The first thing I wanted to do though today is really talk through the dynamics of a single axle van, and obviously we're talking about Jawa vans, but this is any single axle van. So when you think about these, a van is effectively a fulcrum, and where your axle sits is that pivot point for a fulcrum. Now when you're running a single axle van, it is going to be much more easily tipped one way or the other, which makes packing these vans as opposed to a dual axle van even more important. What do I mean by packing? It's not just what you put in this van, it's where you put it in the van, because you are going to be able to vary your ball weight very, very quickly. Now there's a few things that I'm going to point out with this particular one. I've got my trusty super cheap auto ball weight scales here that I'm going to use. Well, the reason I'm going to use these is Matt, my mate here in Jawa in Sydney, also has a set of extremely expensive ball weight scales that are properly calibrated and that sort of thing. So I actually want to test how accurate these scales are. The thing is though, when you're using scales like this back at home, it's not necessarily always going to be 100% accurate, but at least it's going to be consistent. So you get your starting points and then you can start to move things around. So I guess what I'm saying about these things is they're not always perfect and precise, but they're going to be within a standard deviation, and it's still going to show you the effect of moving weight around these vans. The next thing that I want to talk about with these vans is, and I see this written on some of the forums all of the time, this van's got all of this storage space, so of course I'm going to fill it up. Now really, really quickly, if I look at Barry over there, he's sitting over there in the corner with his tub and his canopy. I can fill that thing full of stones or metal dust or something like that, and of course he's going to be over his legal weights, and it's going to make him really difficult to drive, and it's going to make it, obviously the rear axle will be massively overloaded, and so my steering is going to be really light and those sorts of things. So yes, these vans have a huge amount of storage on them, and you need to learn how to use them in a really productive way, depending on one, which van you've got, and also two, how long you're traveling for, where you're traveling to, and what is the nature of your travel. Because to be really honest, if you fill these things completely up, they're in most instances, particularly if it's heavy stuff like water and generators and things like that, you're invariably going to be overweight. So quickly come over here maybe. These beautiful big toolboxes that I always talk about. As you're seeing standard on the 2024 models, is you're going to have a dual jerry can holder here. And dual jerry can holders are great, but it doesn't mean you have to use it as a jerry can holder. As you can see with how easily I'm moving this around, we carry our water container in here because it's neat and tidy and out of the way. But we've also got 240 litres on board with this particular van. 240 litres, or even one of the tanks, which is 120 litres, on average will last Mavo and I about 4 days, and that's each of us having a shower each day. Not a long shower, because when you're off grid and you're limited to water, you're not going to have a long shower, but that's 8 days worth of water, cooking, cleaning, and having showers. How often are you going off grid for longer than 8 days at any given time? And then further to that question, even if you are off grid, is it easier to carry a couple of jerrys with you and then be able to fill them up at a water point when you're out in your vehicle, bring them back and then top up the van? So the point that I'm trying to make here, guys, is whether it's water or whether it's fuel, and I'll address the fuel thing in a second, there's very few circumstances where you're probably going to need to carry 2 full jerrys of either fuel and water, or 2 full jerrys worth of water. The next thing I want to talk about is gas bottles, so I'll come over here. We are carrying 1 9-kilo gas bottle in this particular one, and I know that there's provision here for 2 9 or 2.85 kilo gas cylinders. Now, having travelled extensively like we have, Mavie and I know that we get 10 to 12 weeks out of 1 9-kilo gas bottle. And that's travelling full time. So even when we were in our original Infinity van, which had a gas heater, we'd get at least 8 weeks out of that gas cylinder. Now, I know it's very inconvenient if you run out of gas while you're on the road, but I guess the thing is, if you aren't travelling full time, in almost every instance your holiday is going to be less than 8 weeks. If you're whacking a full one of these in, there's literally no point of carrying 2 9-kilo gas cylinders. There's some other things that you can do if you are still worried about running off a single cylinder. Number one, you could switch to composite bottles. So if you're not aware of composite bottles, which replace the steel, the construction in the bottle, significantly lighter than a 9-kilo or an 8.5-kilo gas cylinder bottle. The other thing that you could potentially do, if you're not willing to go to the expense of those composite bottles, because they are expensive, is you might swap this over to 4.5-kilo cylinders, and that way you're still going to be carrying around about the same amount of gas as one of these. But as I said, 10 to 12 weeks, having a shower every day, cooking meals off grid and that sort of thing is a long time to be off grid. So again, just to round it out, there's really not much point or many situations where you're going to need to be carrying 2 full 9-kilo gas bottles. Let's move over to this bin here. We've got our diesel heater tank here, and we've also got a lot more weight here, or opportunity to put a lot more weight in here. Now, what we choose to do, knowing that these vans are going to be susceptible to high levels of ball weight, is we're going to put as much light stuff in here as possible, but also bulky stuff. So as you can see, we've got our Seagear floor mat, which isn't that heavy. It's a little bit heavier than normal at the moment because it got wet last night. And we've just got blocks and chocks. We choose to carry the Aussie block and chock kit, which the guys at Jawa do actually range. But they're also really, really light, because they're made out of plastic, strong plastic, but they're a lot lighter than carrying around lumps of wood or lumps of metal and that sort of thing to sit your van on. So the next thing I'm going to do is just talk through a couple of the storage units on this particular van. I'm quickly going to open up over here. So we've got a generator slide in this van, and by the name of a generator slide, you're probably going to feel like you need to whack a generator in there. Generators aren't generators, if you know what I mean. So 2 things about this. Number one, we've got 460 amp hours of Horizon lithium in this particular van, 600 watts of Horizon panels, and all that Victron gear, which we'll cover extensively in another video. Unless you get extended periods of bad weather, and or if you're using the air conditioner all of the time, in most instances that is more than enough power to completely be self-sustainable. As long as the sun comes out a few days a week, you're going to have a hard time running that battery down unless you're uber heavy on using the power. The other thing that you'll notice with what we're doing here is we're not carrying that much heavy stuff in here. We've got the rest of our block and chock kit. We've got my hoses and all those connections. We actually do have a cast iron plate here. And we've also got just Mavo's muck mat sitting in here. So obviously a 3.2 Gentrax 50 kilo generator sitting right up the front of the drawer, or close to the front of the van, is going to place more ball weight on this particular van. Quickly, this one doesn't actually have a fall away tunnel boot. We're in the Retreat Escape here today, but it has got a big tunnel boot here with the anti-flap kits in there. We've got a few extra pegs, and also my barbecue sitting in here. Once again, you'll notice the nature of what we've got is we haven't stuffed these things to the eyeballs, even though we're going to be on the road for around about 3 weeks. And to be really honest, with what you take for 3 weeks travel, you're probably going to be taking the same for indefinite travel, because you don't take everything from home. You get stuff as you go along in terms of your food, your water, Mavo's beer, and those sorts of things. So I just wanted to be really, really clear that we are fully loaded in this van for 3 weeks of full-time travel off-grid. Both the water tanks are empty at the moment, but that is by design, because what I want to do is show you the shift in terms of weight when you fill up the front tank, the rear tank, and both of the tanks, just to see the difference in the bore weights. But the starting point that I just wanted to stress here at the beginning of the video is it is really easy to overload these things in the front of the van. By just having a bit of experience and learning what you need and what you don't need, you can significantly reduce the amount of weight that you are going to be starting off with on the ball. So what we're going to do next is move over, and I'm going to use my old ball weight scales just to get a reading on those as the van sits packed for 3 weeks travel without water. And then we're going to bring in the heavy duty expensive scales and have a look and see what the variances are. Then we'll fill up the water tanks and give you some of the I guess the look or the view of what weights change when you shift things around.
All right.
Okay. Ooh.
So just to show you that we are fully packed, come and have a look. So before Ant does all the weights, we are fully packed, oops, ready to go.
Jeez. Fully packed.
And down here.
Bloody big pair of knickers there. Fridge.
Fridge.
Anything in there?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Ready to go.
And under the sink.
Under the sink. Oh, yeah. What about in his bathroom? Probably got nothing in there.
Let me turn the lights on. Yeah, look. We've got our towels hanging.
Which are low weight. Yeah.
Ready to go.
So we really are ready to go.
Ready to go.
Let's get into these weights. All right, so we are going to lower onto my $100 super cheap scales here. Now you'll notice as well that we're not right at the end here, simply because there's a DO35 hitch, and it's a really bad idea with one of these because it's going to slide off and fall. But here we go. So I've got no pressure on that jockey wheel now, that we'll leave it there for safety, along with my safety boots. We're sitting at around 275 kilos on the ball per my really cheap scales. So Matty's been kind enough here to bring over his, what, $15,000 scales, Matty, or something like that with the whole kit? Yep. So we're going to have a look at the variation between those, and then we'll start moving some weight around just to show how easily, one, you can load these things up on the ball, or two, distribute the weight really, really well. So I'll wind this back up. Alright, jockey wheels loose.
247 on the ball.
247, wow. 28 kilos variation between my cheap ones and the not so cheap ones. So instantly, guys, we're already seeing that big variation. Now, as I said, it's an inexact science because it does have that variation, but at least it gives you a starting point. And the other thing that I would say is, at least it's telling you that it's a fair bit heavier than it actually is. It's almost a 10% variance, so you just need to keep that in mind. Now, my scales are going to be different to probably any other scales that you go pick up in super cheap, so unless you've got an opportunity to be able to calibrate them like we've just done now, take it with a grain of salt. But the big thing for me is when we left home the other day, we were at 265 on the ball. More than likely, we're only at around 240, which kind of answers why it felt like it was a little bit rear heavy. Now, talking about this front heavy versus rear heavy thing, when a fulcrum is like this, or the pivot point in a fulcrum is like this, when you start to get sway, it's easier to control. Whereas when the weight is all the way out here, once that momentum starts to move, and I paid attention while I was in physics in year 11 and 12, that is going to be much harder to control and much easier for the energy to actually make that, not just the sway of the van worse, but then start to impact the tow vehicle, and that's when vans tip over. So it isn't actually a bad idea to have a little bit more weight on the ball. 10% is the general rule, but I would say 10 to 12 to 14 or even 15%, providing you're within the limitation or the downforce specifications of your car, which most of the time it's 350 kilos. I'd prefer to have more weight on the ball than I would at the rear of the van, just to mitigate that. Well, it's not going to mitigate the swaying, but mitigate or make it easier to pull that sway back into control. All right, so I didn't even realise it, but Maddie's actually got the proper pads that go, or the weighing pads that go underneath each of the wheels. So before we fill it up, we've got the hose ready to go to do the front tank, then we'll do the rear tank, but we're going to get a readout on the weight prior to putting the water in, so we can actually give you a variance of in terms of what's the tow ball weight sitting at, 10%, 12%, 8%. I have a feeling it's actually going to be below 10%. So we'll get the pads ready to go. Okay, so we are now ready to go. We've got the pressure pad sensors in place. Maddie's going to fire up the forklift in a second and just shift the back. And then we're going to correlate that 248 kilos of ball weight versus the actual weight of the van to give us a bit of a percentage. Now, as I said, I feel like we're going to be well below 10% here. So here we go. Boys are going to move it back. So interestingly enough, we are at 2780 fully loaded, as I said, for that 3 weeks travel, less the water. So when we look at 200 odd kilos of water, we're going to be pushing pretty close to the tear. So again, just to reinforce what I said at the beginning, guys, there is heaps of space in these vans, and a lot of people say the Retreat Escape doesn't have that much storage. It's got more than enough storage for what we need, and to be really honest, if we filled everything up to the extent that we potentially could and carried a lot more heavy stuff, we're going to be going over the 2990. So it's a real balancing numbers game. What we're going to do now is fill that front tank first, and we'll give you the new readout, and we can go from there. We'll see how much that impacts the ball weight. Just making sure she's full, so no one's going to call us out for making stuff up. We know how vicious people can get. All right, so we have just filled up this front tank, and you can already see a big difference in what's going on. So we are now sitting at a grand total of 2874 total weight, and that tank's full. Because we've filled the tank in front of the axle, we're now looking at the tow ball weight at 292 kilos. So the cumulative impact on the ball weight of filling that front tank has actually been just slightly more than 35 kilos. So where the tank is located in this van, it is ahead of that front axle a bit more than some of the other vans, which I would say has a bigger impact on that ball weight. But we're at 2874, 2992 on the ball. That's almost like that holy grail 10% ball weight. So if you've got a Retreat Escape, guys, you've got 4 days worth of water based on the way that Mavo and I use it at least. We're fully packed for 3 weeks worth of travel, and we've hit that holy grail in terms of that that percentage of ball weight to overall weight on this particular van. So thumbs up. All right, we're about ready to load up this rear tank now, so we'll get the boys to whack the hose on and away we go. Okay, so we've got the rear tank full as a goog now, and let's have a look at where we're at in terms of weight. So we've got total weight 29, let's just say 2960. Yep, there we go, 2960. You'll see the impact on the ball weight. It's actually taken almost, what was it before with the front tank? Taken 15 kilos off the ball, and obviously because the tank is mounted below the rear axle, shifting the pivot point a little bit in terms of weight. So guys, to do the maths on that really quickly, it's around about 9% tow ball mass, which is well and truly within specification, and we're just sitting under under ATM as well, which is really cool. So I don't know, I'm going to see if Maddie's got a generator sitting here, and it's going to get very close to the 2990. But we're going to chuck a generator in now that we've got both of the tanks full. This is literally ready to go down the Gibb River Road, or ready to go out to Ningaloo Reef to places like Windarabandi or South Lefroy or something like that, because Danielle and I do not need any more. There's probably, particularly given how many beers she drinks, too much stuff in this van. But we are getting there with a Retreat Escape, which a lot of people have been saying there's not enough storage space. There's more enough storage space, and it's got so many standard inclusions, and we're nailing the weights as well. So you could tell though, guys, you could tell. We had another full 9 kilo gas bottle. If we had loaded our water tanks and those sorts of things up, we're in trouble in terms of our overall weight. So Maddie's going to clean out my mess that I've left in there for him. We'll see what we can do with this. So Maddie's loaded in the 2.5 kVA Westinghouse generator in here. We're just going to pack up the rest of my garbage. And we're going to run back over to the weight machine. Oh, that hurt my finger. Let's see what it says. So, we've done it. We've made it in under the 2990 by 8 kilos, 2982. Our tow ball mass, as a result of adding the generator and moving a little bit of that weight around, has gone to 289. And I think before we were just below 280. So the interesting part about that generator is about 30 kilos, or probably 25 kilos, I'd say, Maddie. If we were to put that right on the ball, we're going to get 25 kilos of downforce. However, it's further back on the van. Yes, it's before the axle or the pivot point, which means that the tow ball weight has gone down slightly, but it hasn't impacted with the full weight of that. It's only actually impacted by about 5 to 10 kilos. So great news is, in a retreat escape that everybody says, oh, I'm not sure whether it's got enough storage, we're ready to go indefinitely. We can take off now. We're full of water. We've got our gas. We've got our jerry cans. We've even got a generator on board, which we wouldn't normally travel with, but just for the purpose of this demonstration, we're ready to go. We do not need to add anything more to this van. Actually, Danielle could drink half the beers that are in that fridge and we'd be lighter again. Just jokes. But hopefully you learned some stuff from this video today, guys. A massive thanks to Maddie and the rest of the guys whose day we've completely probably ruined. But realistically, we wanted to do this because, as you've seen, we've had a ball weight in this van from about 245 kilos almost to 300 kilos just by adding water into different areas and adding weight in different parts of the van. The good news is we could actually reduce ball weight more by going to composite gas bottles, maybe carrying less stuff, because we don't need to carry water with 240 litres of water on board anyway. So hit us up in the comments, guys. We love to answer your questions. Just know that if you put everything you think you need into here, pull it out, halve it, and then put it back in, and you're probably going to be close to what you actually need to take on the road. So thumbs up, guys. Reach out if you need anything, and thanks for watching. Cheers.